The NFL season is young, but there have been some teams and players that have started on both the right and wrong foot. Some teams like the 49ers have started off exactly how they wanted to, and through 3 games, they have 3 games with 30 points and 2 double-digit victories. But they've went to the NFC Championship game in 3 of the last 4 years, and they were expected to be a good team again this year, and they are. And despite the teams we're going to discuss in today's video not being 3-0 like the 49ers are, they are some of the biggest surprises in the young NFL season, and the expectations the teams we are going to discuss in today's video certainly weren't Super Bowl winning expectations by any means, but they've shown a lot of flashes through the first 3 weeks of the year. And to be clear, the order we go in today is not a ranking by any means, and these are 4 of the biggest surprises in the NFL so far, and there is a lot to dive into in today's video, and with that preface out of the way, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are currently leading the AFC South through 3 games and have sole possession of the AFC South. They are in today's video not just because of the record, because ultimately we are just 3 games into the season, but because I like what Shane Steichen is building in Indy. They got beat by the Jags in Week 1 by double digits at home in what was Anthony Richardson's debut, and they turned the ball over 3 times, and they very easily could have tucked their tail between their legs and let the Texans walk in and beat them in Week 2, but they didn't. And they even went on the road with a backup quarterback and beat the Ravens in M&T Bank Stadium, which is a notorious tough place to play. And their next 2 games are home against the Rams and Titans, and there's a non-zero chance this team can be 4-1 through 5 games. And even after that, they play the Jags in Jacksonville, who have been pretty disappointing the last 2 weeks, and as we know, anything can happen in the NFL. And one thing I am proud of the Colts are doing as of late is they're not turning the ball over. They've now went back-to-back games without a turnover while forcing 3 turnovers in the past 2 games and have 2 wins. And the Colts being the biggest surprises so far is due in large part to a shift in belief in what they're building, which was definitely not there in 2022. And there were some woeful games last year, like the 24-0 Jags shutout, or the Broncos game on Thursday night that Indy actually won, or even a 26-3 loss to the Patriots on the road. The team lacked energy, and you could see guys weren't fully bought in last year, and it definitely showed with their on-field play. And the Colts are 2-1 without Jonathan Taylor, who will be coming off the PUP list in a few short weeks. And even in the short time Anthony Richardson has played, you can see the impact he has and how guys rally around him and think he is the long-term solution at just 21 years old. And for a guy who is supposed to throw more interceptions than touchdowns, or just generally struggle this year, for him to hold his own so far is a big win, because again, there's a lot of maturing done between age 21 and age 24 at the quarterback position. And when AR gets back on the field, the ground game is only going to be more explosive, especially when we see the pairing of Anthony and Jonathan Taylor at the same time. And what I went remembered for the Colts is they're not going to be playing in the Super Bowl this year. At least we would all be shocked. But what they're doing is building for tomorrow while still competing today. There's going to be ugly plays from Anthony Richardson later this year, but what we've seen from him in his limited time so far leads me to think they are in very good hands. And third-year pass rusher Kwity Paye has 3 sacks in 3 games, which I am very excited to see him step up, as I was very excited about this defensive line in the 2023 season preview. DeForest Buckner and Samson Ebukam also have 2 sacks apiece, and at minimum, like we saw last week, the Colts will be a thorn in a lot of teams' sides, especially when the run game gets going. And they have been a nice surprise through 3 weeks. Next up is the Chicago Bears for a few reasons. First off, there's absolutely nothing wrong with rebuilding a team. It happens, and every team can't be a dynasty. But it's another to be perpetually bad to the point where there's extremely little hope within the organization. This team's last win was on October 24th, 2022. So we are now over 11 calendar months without a win, and head coach Matt Eberflus has lost 13 games in a row. And they've started the year with not just 3 losses, but 3 straight double-digit losses, with 2 of those losses being by 3 or more scores. And I'd be lying if I said I thought this team would compete heading into the year. But given they won just 3 games last year, and given they brought in players like DJ Moore and Tremaine Edmonds, among many others this offseason, I thought they'd be in the 6-win area, and hell, if things went right, I didn't think it would be unreasonable for them to be 2-1 after 3 games, with potential wins over the Packers and Bucks. But the Bears are in today's video because of how bad they've been, and we're at the point with this franchise where Bears fans are worried that if they had the number 1 overall pick, USC's Caleb Williams might actually return to school because he hypothetically would not want to play for the Bears. And through 3 games, this team is 27th in points scored and 31st in points allowed, and a big reason why they're 31st in points allowed instead of 32nd is because, well, the Broncos just gave up 70 in a single game. But any hope for this team they had just 3 weeks ago heading into the year is gone. And speaking of the Broncos, how bad does a team have to be to lose by 50 points, and the following week, the Broncos are actually favored in a game over the Bears in Week 4, which, by the way, is being played in Chicago. Justin Fields can't read a defense, he takes far too long to process plays, and the Bears aren't great by any means either. And personally, I think Matt Eberflus should be fired. He is now 3-17 as the head coach, and in 3 games this year, the lowest points they've allowed in a single game is 27 to the Bucks, which I guess you can take away 7 from the Shaq Barrett pick 6, which of course isn't the defense's fault, but that doesn't change how bad the Bears have been defensively. Kansas City went up and down the field and they had nearly 500 yards of offense in this game, and they were up 41-0 midway through the 3rd quarter. It's one thing to be a rebuilding team, but it's another to have $100,000 of equipment including lawnmowers stolen from your franchise. This is truly one of the worst situations I've seen over the past few years because they have a first-round bust at quarterback, a head coach that's probably already lost the locker room, and they're going to go into games later this year having lost them before the kickoff even happens. I'd be shocked if they went 0-17, but there is almost nothing positive that will come out of the 2023 Bears season unless they get a second straight number 1 overall pick and use it on Caleb Williams. And to not even be in October and already thinking about the draft and how you can rebuild this team is insane. It's one thing to be 0-3, but it's another to be 0-3 with an average margin of defeat of nearly 20 points per game. And the Bears are in today's video for being a bad surprise because at the moment, this is one of the worst situations in all of football. Back to a good surprise, and we are heading out to the desert to discuss the Arizona Cardinals. I will be the first to admit I thought the Cardinals would surely finish with the top 2 or 3 pick in the 2024 draft, and I guess technically they still could, but I really want to credit them for how they've played through the first 3 weeks. They nearly beat the Commanders in Week 1 and jumped out to a 20-0 lead in Week 2 over the Giants before playing a bad second half, then beat the Cowboys at home by double digits with a score of 28-16. And what's crazy about the Cardinals season so far, and granted you can do this with a lot of other teams, but they're only a few plays away from being 3-0. And if you would have told me the Cardinals were this competitive entering the year and again actually beat the Cowboys by 12 points, I wouldn't have believed you. And this is with a backup quarterback, and I think what has to be talked about with the Cardinals is how far along are they in this rebuild? Because I truly thought Jonathan Gannon would take this job and go 2-15 or 3-14 in his first year and try and build for tomorrow, because remember, they also have the Texans' first round pick next year. But I guess Jonathan didn't get the memo because the culture he's building in the desert is contagious, and just being realistic here, they probably will lose to San Francisco in Week 4, but with how they're playing, the Cincinnati game in Week 5 isn't as much of a lock for Cincinnati as we thought it would have been a month ago. Josh Dobbs has also done a good job in the sense of what's being required from him and is not out there losing the team games. I would also like to credit offensive coordinator Drew Petzing through this because the weapons he has to work with from a talent standpoint are by no means elite, but the Cardinals are quietly 6th in rushing yards as a team and 2nd in yards per carry as a team, and they are certainly getting the most out of the guys they have. They spent a first-round pick on left tackle Paris Johnson Jr., and through 3 games, Paris has been solid, and what's key about that is not only player growth, of course, but the Cardinals' first 3 games were all against NFC East teams, and the NFC East has a ton of great defensive linemen, and there is no shortage of talent there. And obviously, since the Cardinals didn't have high expectations entering the year, nor were they going to be discussed a lot nationally, it definitely flew under the radar just how much Paris would be tested in the early parts of his career, and he managed to get through it, which is critical for both his and the Cardinals' long-term success. Now, I will be honest here, I do think the Cardinals will finish with a losing record, as there is a big talent gap between them and a lot of other teams, and I think we'll see that in Week 4 against the 49ers. But with what Jonathan Gannon has done so far in terms of getting his guys to buy in and to believe what they're going to do from a long-term perspective, this is a lot better of a start than I ever imagined for Arizona entering the 2023 season. Next up is the Houston Texans for a couple of reasons, but the main one is I think they have their quarterback of the future in CJ Stroud. CJ was drafted number 2 back in April, and the Texans were not expected to seriously compete this year, and granted they probably won't, but like we said in the Week 3 recap, who cares? Because it finally looks like you have your quarterback of the future. There were a few plays in particular against Jacksonville that were big boy plays and not third game of his career at just 21 years old plays. And the Texans stunned the Jags with a 37-17 win, in Jacksonville by the way, and this was the second straight game of CJ throwing for 280 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't want to overreact to the 384-yard game against the Colts and CJ is the future because of that game, when in fact the Colts were up by 21 points and ultimately won by double digits. But the Jacksonville game was something different, and through 3 games, CJ is top 5 in the NFL in passing yards and has 4 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. And I think this is one of the biggest surprises of the year so far, is how good CJ is playing, and this is despite the Texans' run game being, well, awful, and having multiple offensive linemen down will do that. But for reference, the Texans are 31st in yards per carry, as they're averaging just 2.8 yards per carry and have just 210 rushing yards in 3 games. So this offense has essentially been, CJ, go make a play because we can't run the ball. And both Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and especially Tank Dell, have been great throughout the first few weeks of the year, which is a pleasant surprise. And guys, it's not unrealistic to think CJ can throw for 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns as a rookie. Willie, of course, is something else, but he's top 5 in the NFL in passing yards through 3 games. Yes, the rookie mistakes are going to happen, and that is to be expected, but CJ has had to improvise a bit at times in the early part of the year, which was a knock on him coming out of Ohio State, and that he can't play out of structure because the big 4 receivers he had made him, and how he'll never be able to adjust to the speed of the NFL level. But he makes throws with anticipation, he's doing an excellent job of distributing the football, and in a conference where you better have a guy if you ever remotely think you're going to compete for a Super Bowl, the Texans look to have their guy. And through 3 weeks, this has definitely been one of the better surprises of the young season. Passing under pressure was a big thing for CJ, and through 3 weeks, he is 9th in completion percentage under pressure, with a higher percentage under pressure than both Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. The rebuild will take some time, but I think the Texans finally have their guy. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps tremendously. Also, please check out the pinned comment, as if you're like me and love football, this definitely will interest you. And until the next video, please be safe, and have a great day. Love you guys.